Okay, so in the first part of our discussion about using the text, we talked about summary and paraphrase and the kind of limitations of both of those. And paraphrase, remember, summary is great when you want to highlight the main idea or the gist of a larger piece. Paraphrase is great for when you want to look at a specific passage and reword it into your own words. But there are times when we want to use the voice of the writer in our own writing because changing it would eliminate the meaning. There's something significant or important about the author's specific word choice. So, direct quotations are words taken directly from the text that you use in your writing. They are not changed from the original. And as you guys know, they require quotation marks they they require quotation marks around the phrase or the sentence used, and also following the at the end of that sentence there needs to be an in-text or internal citation after quoted passages. So, what is the purpose of a direct quotation? Well, direct quotations support an established argument developed by you, the writer. It explains why the author of a text is doing, or what the author of a text is doing, and why she or he does it. And it's evidence or proof that what is being said is logical and reasonable. It did not appear out of thin air. So you're going to have some sort of claim or some sort of interpretation that you want to prove with the text because it's showing here is where I got this from and here's what it means. So when do I use direct quotations? Well, you don't want to use, okay, so here's the thing. Direct quotations should be used sparingly because if it's like hot or spicy food, if you want to have if you overspice a meal, it's going to spoil that meal. So if you have too many direct quotations or quotations that are too long and lengthy, that kind of spoils your paper. So instead of long sentences, you want to quote the best nugget or the most powerful portion of that sentence. You want to break it up and put the best little nugget in your writing. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So, length, type, and quality. So, the length of your direct quotations should be short. They should be no longer than 2 lines. If you have these great big giant long quoted passages, it tells me one of 2 things. It tells me that you've just chosen arbitrarily direct quotations to just kind of put in to fill up space. Basically, that's what it tells me. And if I wanted to read that much of the novel, I could read that much of the novel myself. So you want to make sure that you keep your quotations short. If you have a longer passage, you want to make sure that you kind of paraphrase that so your voice controls the tone of the paper. You want to make sure that you choose quotes that enhance your work and actually prove what you're saying versus, picking up the book and turning to a random page and putting it in that way. So you really want to ask yourself, do my quotations have a purpose? Do they fit with my writing? And are they clarifying to the reader and not confusing to them? So, how not to use quotes. You don't want to use quotes to tell the story. Keep in mind when you're writing your literary analysis that your reader is familiar with the story. They've read it, they know what's happening, so you don't need to summarize it for them. You don't want to use quotes for the sake of filling up space. They have to be relevant and meaningful. You also don't want to use quotes, as I said earlier, that are overly long. And you don't want to start or end a paragraph with a direct quotation. Okay, so when trying to write a literary analysis or when trying to incorporate the words of someone else into our writing, there are a couple of common pitfalls. And by a couple of common, I mean really one common pitfall. And that's what I call the loose balloon quote, or quotes that are dropped in that have no kind of context, or they're not held down with your own writing. And they're basically quotes that are disconnected from your other ideas. And the way to avoid those loose balloon quotes is through integration, integrating your direct quotations. In other words, direct quotes can't stand on their own as sentences by themselves. You can't just plop them in between your writing and expect them to be grounded, so to speak. So when you think about quote integration, what does it mean to integrate? It means to combine two things. So you're combining your words with the author's words. You have an insightful claim of your own. You have your own interpretation. Now you need to cite those sources to kind of prove it. And in order to do that, you have to transition your ideas with someone else's smoothly. So, for example, I have a couple of examples of loose balloons. So you'll see what I mean when I say that they can't stand on their own as sentences. So here, right here, I have, as with class, gender becomes an immediate concern once the characters realize that a murderer is afoot. The adventurer Lombard acknowledges that the men in the house are all deserving of suspicion, but he cannot at first bring himself to suspect the women. So whose ideas are these? These are mine. These are my words. I have this kind of paraphrase, and this is my kind of statement that I want to highlight. And here I have my quote from the text. At any rate, I suppose you'll leave the women out of it. And that is absolutely from the text. And I have my in-text citation, my period at the end. It looks good, right? No, because this I have as a sentence all on its own. You can't plop direct quotations in between your words and between your ideas. They have to be integrated. They have to be contextualized in a way. And I'll show you how to fix that in just a second. So you'll notice that I have my words, the author's words, then my words again. And here I have my direct quotation kind of sandwiched in between. There's no introduction. There's no kind of setting the context. It's not integrated. Another example of a loose balloon would be this. Here I have my words, my ideas, and then my quotation from the text. It's quoted appropriately, it's got its in-text citation, but it's not integrated. It's standing, see right here? I'm making it a sentence of its own, and they can't stand on their own as complete sentences. Another example, here I have a quote that's bordering on too long, but I have it at it's standing on its own as a loose balloon. And then another example. I hope you get what I mean when I'm saying, here I have my my point, and then my proof from the text. So how do I fix it? Well, one way I can fix these kind of loose balloons is through signal phrases. And signal phrases are just various ways of saying this person says, right? Or this person, says. There are different ways of showing how, there are different ways of giving phrases of attribution. One way to use a signal phrase to fix a loose balloon is to use the signal phrase and separate the quote with a comma. So, for example, and then there were none reflects a pessimistic view of human nature, demonstrating how every character is guilty of committing the most heinous crimes. Whose ideas are those? Those are mine. Those are my words. More suspenseful than Christie's other novels, and then there were none creates a feeling of fatalistic despair as the island's inhabitants begin to die one by one. Whose words are those? Those are my words. While traveling on the train to the coast, where Mr. Bloor will take a boat to the island, a drunk warns him, quote, the day of judgment is at hand. Later, Miss Brent quotes from the Bible, the heathen are sunk down in the pit that they made. The wicked shall be burned into hell. The first night after dinner, Hidden Voice accuses them all of murder, but they eventually realize there is no God, and one of them is stalking the group. So here I have, if we look at what my loose balloon used to be, this was a sentence all on its own, but instead I have integrated it with my words, because here are my words. Ugh. Here are my words. And then here is my signal phrase right here, a drunk warns, and then what the drunk says. So I have my words woven and integrated with the author, so now they are a complete sentence together. It's kind of like one big happy family. And similar for the second one, because there is my signal phrase right there. Another way of showing another example of fixing the loose balloon is my example with Philip Lombard. He remarks, at any rate. So I have my words integrated with the author, so this isn't standing on its own as a complete sentence. Another way to fix your loose balloons is to add a sentence of your own and then a colon. So, Vera Claythorne's former lover, Hugo Hamilton, describes her in grotesque terms. Women are fiends, absolute fiends, etc., etc. So here I have all of my thoughts, all of my words. Then I have my kind of attributed phrase, my sentence, and then the colon that puts his words or the author's words in with mine. So this is no longer standing on its own as a complete sentence. They are woven together. And then finally, and this is kind of the best way to do it, is really to break it up. Break up the quotation and choose just the important nugget or the best piece of the text and add that into your own writing. So you make the quotation a part of your own sentence without any punctuation marks. So if you remember my example that I said was bordering on too long, you see this right here? I have taken that one quote, I have broken it up, and I have just picked out the best parts. So, if the island is creepier than expected, the house is less so. It is not a cliched, decrepit Victorian pile with tortured Gothic history, with creaking wood and dark shadows, but instead the essence of modernity. And so notice I don't have my my in-text citation here. I have it at the end of all of that. So I've taken bits and pieces from the longer original passage and I've put it into my own words. It is more frightening for Christie to write about murders in a modern house. The clean setting with no atmosphere allows the feel not of worn and repetitive, whatever. You see what I mean? I've just taken one part from the original passage and I've put it into my own writing. So really it is quintessentially my words mixed together with the author's, and there are no loose balloons. And here's another example of taking parts of the text and working it in with my words. So one way that you can remember integration is by thinking about it needing 4 essential parts. When quoting a passage from a text, you want to have an introductory phrase with attribution. Then you want to have the small nugget that you take word for word from the text, and then that in-text citation, followed by a sentence of explanation. You don't want to move from one quote to the next. You want to take the time to explain what that text or your interpretation, how have you read that quoted material? How does it prove your point, provide your analysis? So one way you can think about integrating your quotes and kind of developing these paragraphs that will eventually lead to body paragraphs is to kind of think about that pie formula that we talked about when writing your body paragraphs. And of course, you have to have a point, an illustration, and an explanation. And the point is always going to be your topic sentence that indicates the main idea of the paragraph that usually ties to and relates to your thesis. You want to remember that your topic sentence is never a quote. You never begin or end a paragraph with quoted material or paraphrased material or summarized material. It is your interpretive point of view that you intend to establish in that paragraph. Followed by your topic sentence, you want to look at your illustrations. And your illustrations, of course, are going to be from the text. You're going to illustrate your point with a combination of summary, paraphrase, and direct quotation. And make sure that when you use your paraphrase or your direct quotation, you have that introduction, that context, that phrase of attribution, the quoted nugget, your citation, and your explanation. All of that goes into integrating that direct quotation. It takes a little bit of time, but when you do it right, it's perfect. And it makes sense. And then finally, after you've illustrated all of your textual support, you want to connect the P to the I, otherwise it's not a piece of pie you want to eat. You have to analyze the quote in relation to the larger idea, the so what that you establish in your thesis statement or the point that you're trying to prove. And you never, ever, ever want to end a paragraph with a quote or a paraphrase. You always want to take the opportunity, you want the last word. You take the opportunity to explain the significance, the overall meaning, the so what. So if we look at, I have my little pie example, my pie quote integration. As with class, gender becomes an immediate concern once the characters realize that a murder is afoot. We've talked about this. This is my topic sentence. It's talking about gender and class. Then I have my paraphrase. I have my textual support that I've got my phrase of attribution. I have my nugget, my quote, and then I have my sentence of explanation. But the novel states plainly time and time again that women are indeed capable of murder. Not only does Dr. Armstrong point out that the murderers on Soldier Island required no great physical strength to enact, but all the guests, including the 3 women present, were already guilty of murder before they came to the island. So that's kind of an explanation of why all of that matters. It's a point of analysis. So here I have my topic sentence, my illustration, and then my explanation. And you want to do that as many times as it takes in your body paragraph. So that's how we get to quote integration. And we'll talk more about that. You're going to be doing some quote integrating of your own for a graded assignment. And please let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about integrating your quotes. I'm also going to be offering an extra credit assignment. It is a tutorial called Don't Float Your Quote. And I highly recommend that you guys take a look at that because it kind of reinforces some of the ideas that I talk about in here. So let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns, and other than that, make sure that there are no loose balloons floating around in your writing.